everybody, my name is Deacon Matheson. I operate the piercing end of Wonderland Tattoo Studios here in Kitchener, Ontario, Canada. I've been a professional piercer for about 20 years, so we've got a little bit of experience under our belt, and I'm a member of the Association of Professional Piercers, or the APP. Here at Wonderland Studios, we are committed to giving our clients the best possible experience from start to finish, and what that's also going to include is once you leave the studio, so that's going to be healing and aftercare. So today, we're going to talk a little bit about healing and aftercare. We're going to look at what we can really kind of expect from some piercings. Some piercings are going to take even upwards of a year to heal. So what do we do? What don't we do? Why do we do it? And what can come to expect from our aftercare process? So we're talking about healing a piercing. Well, what exactly does healed mean? Generally, when you're going to be talking about a healed piercing, we're going to be thinking of something that from the entrance to the exit, all the way through, has a solid tube of tissue that's been formed. Basically what we call this tube of tissue is a fistula. At this point, that piercing is no longer an open portal to the body, so we don't really need to be as concerned with things like opportunistic infections and bacteria, because it's basically the same as the skin that's on the outsides of our body anyways. When it does come to healing and aftercare, some clients, they might kind of seem a little bit confused. It's not uncommon, especially as a piercer, to have someone come in and have this, kind of blanket statement, which is like, well, every single time I get a piercing, they just tell me something different. Having been a piercer for 20 years, I've definitely been that piercer that's told you something different. Over the course of time, we've recommended using things as horrible as like antibacterial hand soap. Bactine was something for a while. But realistically, as an industry, we've kind of made those recommendations. In the past, I think pretty much any piercer will have made some recommendations to a client that would probably make the piercer that they are today cringe. So what we're going to talk about right now is kind of the modern age of piercing, healing, and care, things to do and some things to avoid. When talking about healing and aftercare, I think one of the most important factors to consider is realistically just your general health and your well-being. Your immune system and its strength is really going to be the primary proponent of if you're going to be able to heal this piercing. Things like having a healthy, balanced diet is going to be infinitely important. We want to make sure that your body has all the nutrients that it's going to need to go through this healing process. We also want to make sure that we're getting an appropriate amount of sleep and rest, that we kind of get the recuperation that we need. Even doing things like reducing levels of stress and having those effects on the body, down to something as absolutely simple as taking a multivitamin or some kind of supplement to make sure, again, that the body has what it needs to go through this process. Cardiovascular health is also going to be really, really important. A lot of times people ask, well, I just got a piercing, can I work out, or when can I work out? And realistically, if it feels comfortable, you should probably be able to do it right away. Being able to have good blood flow and good blood supply to a healing piercing is going to be pretty important in its healing. So as long as what you're doing in terms of your exercise isn't going to be impeding the movement of the body or causing any irritation to the piercing, you actually should be encouraged to work out and to resume those kind of daily activities. So most times when considering healing and aftercare, an important concept to consider is that a lot of times less is going to be more. We have an acronym that we use in the piercing industry that really kind of helps to hammer this point home, and it's something that we call the LITHA method, L-I-T-H-A. What that stands for is leave it the hell alone. Now, leaving it alone doesn't essentially mean not doing anything ever. Another way to look at it is basically just kind of do no harm. So what we want to try to do is avoid things like harsh chemicals and cleansers that really don't have a lot of purpose in modern care. So things like rubbing alcohol, isopropyl alcohol, hydrogen peroxide, tea tree oil, witch hazel, witchcraft, spectrogel, Cetaphil. Really none of those things are going to be involved in wound care. You're never really going to talk to a nurse or a doctor or anyone that's involved in wound care dynamics and have them have these recommendations. So they're really kind of pretty archaic ideas that we should kind of do away with. Another way to look at it, basically, if you wouldn't take the solution, product, chemical, or cleanser and just open pour it into your eyeball, then the chances are pretty good that you don't want to be putting it on a fresh piercing either. So what do we use? It's basically down to two things: warm water, and this right here, sterile saline wound wash. So now that we kind of have half an idea of kind of how our bodies heal and what to use in order to heal a piercing, let's kind of take a little bit of a walk through exactly what it is that we're going to be doing, or at least a brief idea of it. The first and most important step, always freshly washed, clean hands. Obviously, you can't really expect to clean a piercing if you're going to be taking the outside world that's been contaminating your hands and applying that directly to your fresh wound. So wash those hands, wash them properly, make sure you get your nail beds, make sure you're getting in between your fingers, the backs of your hands, your wrists, and your nice little opposable thumbs. After you've washed your hands, what we're going to be looking to do is to remove any kind of dried matter or discharge that's been, built up or left on the piercing. I find this is most easily done in the shower, as we're already going to be in there every single day, going through our daily routines. If your shower head happens to come off the wall, a really neat little trick is just to pop that off and answer the telephone to wherever your piercing site happens to be. We're going to use that soft, warm water to soften up any kind of dried matter. We're going to use the pressure from that shower head to kind of blast and expel that away from the piercing site. And that's kind of how we're going to get rid of a lot of our dried matter, or what's usually kind of referred to as crusties. After you think that you've gotten rid of any kind of dried matter, what's really important is to actually check to make sure that you did it. Something to keep in mind is that buildup will build up on the buildup that you have allowed to build up, so let's just not be gross. Now that we've gotten rid of our dried matter, what we're going to do is apply some saline wound wash. This is the only thing that's really kind of designed for a healing wound. It's literally in the title. It's got two ingredients. It's got salt, it's got water. It's also made by science. Back in the day, it was a little bit more common to have people mix up a sea salt solution themselves, and in today's modern age, it really kind of leaves a lot of variables in play. You can't make sure that it's not breeding bacteria. You don't know if you've got your ingredients and your ratios right, so it could be hypertonic, it could be hypotonic. In this solution right here, isotonic, so you don't really need to worry too much about it. Saline can either be sprayed directly to the body, or for some little areas like inside intricate ear cartilage, you can look to spray and saturate some non-woven gauze and apply that to the area that way. Something else that's a little bit more important when it comes to healing and aftercare, at least what I feel, is a little bit of heat transference. If we look to see how the body heals, again, it's blood flow and it's circulation. So if we can apply heat to an area and increase blood flow and circulation, we're usually going to see a much better healing result. So think about maybe taking your saline solution, saturating some gauze, warming that up a little bit, and applying that to the area as a warm compress. Alternatively, things like mugs that have been kind of warmed up with some warm water can also be held to the area to still kind of get that heat transfer and help our body out as we're looking to move through the process of healing and aftercare. Now, should you find that your skin's a little bit more prone to dryness, you probably want to look to do a quick little rinse of the area. Even though saline is isotonic to our bodies and it doesn't really do too much damage, if your skin's a little bit more sensitive to things like dryness, that saline as it dries can leave a little bit of a salty residue, and for some people that can be cause for irritation. If this is going to be you, just a quick little piece of gauze and some warm water to do a slight little rinse can kind of be the difference. Once you've got everything rinsed away, the very last step is just to keep things nice and bone dry. I usually like to recommend air drying. You can look to use things like gauze or paper towel to dry it off, but if you happen to have something like a hair dryer in the house, if that's got a low or a cold setting, then you can basically just use that as forced air drying to really quickly kind of get at it. Especially, again, things like intricate ear cartilage piercings, where it might be a little bit harder to get into. You could apply a little bit more undue pressure trying to get in there with gauze or paper towel. A hands-free method is usually going to be a little bit more effective. So now that we know how to take care of our piercing, let's talk about things that we maybe shouldn't be doing, or tips that can kind of help us get through to having our healed piercing. One of the first things that we want to try to avoid is touching, handling, and contact. Probably the number one rule is simply just don't touch it. That's going to involve not touching with your hands, trying to keep away from like any kind of bumping, friction, rough activities, even down to things like avoiding any kind of oral contact or bodily fluids on the piercing. So especially if you have any kind of oral piercing, you want to avoid things like kissing, exchange of bodily fluids. But I mean, realistically, any piercing, you want to make sure that you don't have other bodily fluids on those either. We want to avoid things like submerging the piercing in bodies of water that we're really not too sure of. I mean, showers and some baths are going to be fine, but things like hot tubs, swimming pools, lakes, and open water in particular should be avoided. In some certain scenarios, some piercings can have a clear occlusive bandage placed over top of it. Generally, what I like to recommend is a product called Tegaderm, manufactured by 3M, which for things like some body piercings like nipples and navels can easily seal off that area to allow you to go swimming. But at the end of the day, an ounce of prevention is going to be worth a pound of cure. So if you can avoid an environment that's going to be questionable, it's pretty much going to be your best bet. Just keeping a clean environment is going to be able to do wonders. So change your sheets, your pillowcases once or twice a week. And a really, really cool trick, especially for things like piercings on the head and the face, is just to use a t-shirt as a pillowcase. You can kind of put your pillow inside of it, sleep on it one night, turn it over the next, turn that t-shirt inside out, put your pillow back inside of it, sleep on it again, and turn it over. So you basically get 4 clean sleeping surfaces out of 1 t-shirt, 2 t-shirts a week if you do the math, and that's just an additional way to kind of keep barriers moving and recycling to keep the area really, really nice and clean. For things like body and torso related piercings, even just sleeping in a clean cotton t-shirt or tank top, they're going to be changing with consistency, can also do wonders to kind of keep those barriers clean and moving with consistency. Speaking of sleeping, try not to sleep on your piercings. Probably one of the hands down largest issues with especially ear-related piercings is going to be the application of pressure. Realistically, we know that it's probably going to happen, but anything that you can kind of do to avoid it is going to do absolute wonders. So if you've got the right side of your ear pierced, maybe try to sleep on your left. You can use things like using body pillows to kind of support the knees to maybe make it a little bit easier to be in a certain position. Even using things like those U-shaped travel pillows inside the pillowcase with your actual pillow to help support the head and the neck a little bit easier, to maybe make it a little bit more difficult for twisting, turning in your sleep when it's a little bit harder to kind of manage. One of the biggest issues that we do see is clients not checking in. Now, I usually feel like most of my clients are pretty good with it, but a lot of times we'll have people come in with outside problems from other studios, and a lot of that can be fixed with properly sized jewelry and known quality materials. So if we didn't do your piercings, that's not really too much of a problem. Feel free to come on in, but if I've pierced you, absolutely, for sure, make sure that you hit your size down appointment. A lot of piercings will need a little bit of a change in the length of post at around about like the 6-week mark. Usually about 6 to 8 for most people in terms of weeks will be sufficient. So if it's been about a month and a half since, say, you've had a helix or a nostril piercing, you should really check in with your piercer to see if you need a shorter piece of jewelry. This can make it a whole lot easier to avoid things like pressure, especially from things like sleeping on it, to make sure it's not getting caught or tied up in hair. And as we're kind of in this COVID world right now, hopefully when you're watching this video we're out of it, things like mask loops can also be caught and snagged, so shortening up those posts can really do a lot of good. So hopefully this has been a little bit informative. Obviously when you come in to have your piercing done, we're going to go through our aftercare with you verbally as well as written, but having watched the video might kind of give you a little bit of information to be prepared, might kind of have your questions ready to be asked and answered. If you're not one of our clients, well, consider becoming one. One of the things I want to leave you guys off with today is basically we're piercers and we're not doctors, okay? So following the aftercare advice is fantastic. Keeping in contact with your piercer is a great idea, but at the end of the day, if you suspect that something is gone terribly awry, if you think that there's an infection, if anything really kind of makes you go, look to the medical industry, right? If you've got a general practitioner, go see them. If you don't, get yourself to a walk-in clinic, right? There's no harm, there's no shame in it. You know, the thing to kind of keep in mind is that Mother Nature is well, it's pretty vicious. So it doesn't matter what kind of sterilization that we're using. You know, the best placed piercings with the best possible jewelry, the best modern aftercare methods can still be subject to any kind of like opportunistic infection. And if that happens to occur to you, make sure that you get the help that you need. I've been Deacon Matheson. This is Wonderland Tattoo Studios. Click the like and subscribe. Hope hopefully we see you in the house.